IVM.
Hello, we're Team Explainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Press Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Explainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at Explainer In to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Explainer family. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Sara, your host for the day, and both Vagda and Prafula are with me on today's episode. As always, we have 3 segments for you. In our big story, we're talking about the great scam of health foods. In our food for thought segment, we're taking a look at doping at the Olympics. And then in our final segment, we will be roasting and toasting our fave and least fave items. All right, let's begin with our big story. Now, this isn't exactly a news story in the sense it isn't something that broke recently, but it is something that we've been living with for years on end. We Explainer republished Samarth Bansal's newsletter called The Interval, and he made the most interesting observations about the widely popular Shark Tank India in his latest edition. No, we're not on a rampage against Shark Tank India. We know we spoke about Ashneer last week, but it's coincidence if you may. So coming back to Samar's observation, on the one hand, the show introduced us to a whole bunch of startups. A major chunk of them, 28% of the televised pitches, mind you, were food and beverage companies that sold packaged food. And here's the interesting part. Most of them promised to deliver delicious food while being both healthy and good for us. So Samar's investigation took a deep dive into how these products that claim to be healthier than big food alternatives with all the buzzwords, sugar-free, preservative-free, all-natural, low-fat, no carbs, high protein, vegan, keto-friendly, plant-based, and so on, were probably just a big, big scam. And that got all of us thinking, what is the deal with packaged food and all these promises that honestly sound too good to be true? He found, and I quote, "They're all profiting from what we don't know about food, exploiting the public's anxiety about their diets and confusion around nutritional information to make ultra-processed junk food look healthier." So while a chips brand can claim to be healthier than all the rest because of its low fat, what it doesn't reveal is that salt levels are skyrocketing. A sugar-free drink sounds great, but well, in its ingredients, a sugar alternative that elicits a glucose response and insulin spike that's worse than table sugar would. So if that's the case across the board, be it big food or startups, how in the name of God does one even know what they're consuming and essentially cut through the clutter of these incredibly confusing nutritional labels in the back of the pack?
So I think food labels are daunting because, we get big words or vague numbers thrown at us. But if we look actually carefully, we might be able to figure out what exactly goes into our favorite snacks. Samarth Bansal pretty much says the same thing in his analysis. And it's a shame that labeling isn't talked about more. And I didn't even know how much repackaged information we were getting until I did my own research. Every other week, there's this new breakthrough study about what is good for you and what isn't. Sometimes carbs are good, other times they're the devil. And same for sugars. And we get this information without any context. And did you know, despite the villainization of sugar, we're actually getting way more of it than we actually require? In India, health experts have said that we've been so focused on undernutrition that overnutrition took us by surprise. And that's why there's been a global trend of obesity and heart disease, because our overall calorie consumption has shot up in the last few decades without us even knowing. Take a bag of chips, for example. The label won't tell you whether you're eating simple carbs, which is basically like straight sugars to your bloodstream. Your sugar could be listed as a gram or even at 0, and you'll still be feeling the effects of a sugar crash later. What the label will tell you is that it has probably like 250 calories, maybe for a 2.5 serving size. Now, if you eat that whole bag of chips, which is mostly filled with air, you've still consumed. I see, I've hit a nerve.
Yes.
But even when we consume that packet of air, we are actually consuming at least 500 calories. And it's the same for fats. The only ones listed on your labels are the bad fats. And obviously, they're going to list it as zero trans fat or fat free, but you're not actually eating something that's a negative percentage of fat. Even sodium is reframed to divert your attention from the fact that small packets are loaded with this stuff. A packet might tell you that it contains maybe 20 to 25% sodium, which is lesser than other things on the market. But if you eat even more than one serving, you have consumed 50 to 60% of your sodium intake for the day. And suddenly,
serving sizes always make me wonder. I have no idea who's deciding these serving sizes that are less than one packet of chips.
Yeah, like, am I a family of 4?
I don't know. One packet, I'm basically snorting. By the second, we're eating.
Yeah. And now all the high BPs may start to make sense, right? And I guess this is...
once I was heating a glass of water for making jasmine tea. And I ended up looking at the label.
You're having jasmine tea.
Yeah, that's a staple in my house in the winter. After dinner. It's nice. It's just plain water. Anyway, and that's what I'm about to prove here also, because the label on that can of jasmine tea, it had 0 of everything. I was like, what is the label for? It has 0 sugar, 0 carbs, 0 fat, 0 everything else. Everything on that label said 0.
It's just vibes.
It's just vibes. Yes, it's just vibes. Oh my God. God.
I think the vibes are why we fall for it. For all the 0 fat, 0 sodium. And I realized that all the nutrition info that is listed is with a baseline of a 2000 calorie diet, which is fair because we do need a common baseline. But that 2000 calorie diet is a daily recommended intake for really active 9-year-olds.
What?
Yeah, that's not going to suffice even if you're like a couch potato.
Oh man.
So am I obese?
Vagda, if you're obese. Oh man.
Just all overgrown 9-year-olds on this podcast.
That checks out for me even mentally though.
Yeah, I would agree.
It was a subtle dig at somebody here. I'm not going to say who. I'm not going to say why.
Thank you.
No, but coming back to the topic, there have been lobbies to push front of pack labeling, telling us exactly what is in our snacks. But why aren't we doing any better to regulate what we're feeding our bodies? Is it a lack of framework? Are our systems not equipped for such an overhaul? What do you think?
I think actually I'm just going to totally digress from what you're talking about. I'm actually going to go one step ahead and trash organic food. I know our labeling and everything is great and it's kind of treated like a gospel, but I'm going to question that very idea. So honestly, tell me, how likely are you to believe a brand when they say they are organic?
Okay, I'm again bad example because I don't care.
I was thinking the other day, it is, unless it's grown in a lab, it's organic. I don't understand why they have to put organic wheat, organic vegetables on everything when it's coming from a farm.
No, but farm as in organic means that they've not used like fertilizer or like pesticide, which is synthetic, stuff like that to make it organic. Yeah. So the soil is natural and organic, which is maybe they've used like manure that has no chemicals, synthetic chemicals.
But that's highly unlikely, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you're a skeptic as well, basically. I'm a big skeptic too. And in my head, if you were telling me that your brand is organic, your woke quotient may go up in my head, but not your credibility. But that's just also me being paranoid to the level of crazy. It doesn't come out of nowhere though. The most cursory search on Google will show you how in 2016-17, there were a lot of studies and writing around organic food fraud. There were reports of food safety officials themselves saying that most organic food in the market is fake. It's just a label that says organic, but it's not actually organic. ICRIER did a big study on it and it was practically covered everywhere. And then the FSSAI, which is the body that regulates food safety and standards in India, it took notice. And then they came out with the Food Safety and Standards Organic Foods Regulations in 2017, under which food business operators, which is basically sellers of food that is organic, they have to have their product certified as organic by bodies that are accredited under the government. And there are 2 or 3 different types of logos that you have to look for. If you want to know that your product that the product you're buying is actually organic, the product should have a certain logo, Jaivik something. There are 2-3 different kinds of logos that go on your products packaging, which is great. I mean, that's a good way to prevent fraud, right? But how many people know that you're supposed to look for that logo? I mean, I don't even remember the name of that logo. I just said it. I said half of it. So apparently a survey of 550 consumers in metro cities revealed that nearly 70% did not know that they were supposed to be looking for these logos. That's one. But the other is about my suspicion, which is that how do I trust it's organic when the certification process is sort of opaque? How do I know it's organic? How do I know that the certification is good enough? Look at what happened to organic cotton. India supplies more than half of the world's organic cotton. But according to an investigative report by New York Times, many insiders from the Indian organic cotton industry say that the certification process allows for many, many opportunities of fraud. So how does the certification happen?
Why am I not even surprised?
Yes, it's that disappointed but not surprised.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah. So I'll just take you through what the certification process is. Basically these bodies that are accredited by the government, and these bodies depend on reports from opaque local inspection agencies that base their conclusions on a single planned yearly inspection or a few random visits. Okay. In November 2021, the European Union voted that they no longer want to accept Indian organic exports certified by these 3 companies: Control Union, EcoCert, and OneCert. These 3 companies are certified are accredited under the government of India.
Nice.
Now you might ask why I'm bringing cotton into this. Because the standard setting happens in a synergized manner under the National Program for Organic Production. And it includes non-food items also. And yes, I wasn't able to find any explosive news reports of fraud in the organic food sector. But guess what I did find? I found that the same 3 companies are also responsible for food certification.
Fun!
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, OneCert is one of the few companies whose accreditation has been suspended by the government of India on account of the EU's charges also. So हम खुद अपना कुछ investigation नहीं करेंगे. EU ने बोला नहीं करना तो अपना भी suspend कर देंगे. And it wasn't just about cotton also there. Shipments of organic sesame, hulled sesame, white sesame, amaranth, and flax seeds were all flouting these standards. So take from this what you can, I guess. All I can say is I'm less crazy when I'm paranoid about this. I just know that now.
And all I can say is I need to start caring a little bit more about the kind of crap I put into my head.
But like how, right? I'm so concerned now that I know about all of this. How am I going to make sure that this is organic? How am I going to make sure if I can't even trust the certification process? There's just no way.
On that disappointing note, we come to the end of our first segment. We will be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं, हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार।
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. We're Team Splainer, and make sure you follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. Okay, let's get started with some food for thought. I've been stopping myself from cracking a dad joke, but heck, why not? Even though we spoke about food in the earlier section, the food for thought is now. Thank you. We can all ignore me.
What?
I started off with this is the dad joke. I contemplated not saying it.
I gave you a pity laugh.
I was going to say Prafula laughed. Anyway, moving on very swiftly. For some context setting, Russia has been banned from using their country's name, flag, and national anthem at the Olympics due to an investigation that uncovered a government-backed doping program. So the country's athletes marched into the stadium this year with the Olympic flag under the name ROC, an acronym for Russian Olympic Committee. They couldn't even participate in the Summer Games, and the ban continues for 4 more years across all major sporting events in the world. So be it the Olympics or the 2022 Football World Cup. And only those athletes can participate if they can prove that they're untainted by this big scandal. So, what is this latest doping scandal all about? The case involves a 15-year-old figure skater, Kamila Valieva, from, surprise, surprise, Russia, who submitted a routine sample which came back positive for something called trimetazidine. It's a heart medication that improves endurance. Now, that's not the only problem. The problem basically lies with the dates of how this all went about. So the sample was submitted in December, but Russian authorities confirmed the results only on February 8th, which is a day after she won the gold in a team competition. The Russian anti-doping agency then temporarily suspended her, and the results basically put her gold medal in doubt. Valieva then challenged her suspension, and the committee lifted the suspension for undisclosed reasons. A day later, she was seen at the practicing ring, and once again, the test came back to haunt her. The International Testing Agency on Feb 11th confirmed that she had indeed failed a test for a banned substance, and the International Olympic Committee was going to ask the Court of Arbitration for Sport to overturn Russia's decision to lift the ban. Then the Russian committee continues to maintain that her tests were negative before and after December 25th, and thus she should be allowed to keep her gold medal. Their big reason for caring so much about this case, Valieva is a minor. Eventually, after a lot of back and forth, the Court of Arbitration for Sport ruled that indeed she is allowed to compete in the women's singles thanks to her negative result in Beijing and her status as a minor. And all they said was that if she were to finish in the top 3, which most reports claim is going to be easy for her, there just wouldn't be a medal ceremony until the case is fully investigated and concluded. That's it. And there's no telling how long this case will take. So this is a big, big deal because all major international sporting committees are in complete disagreement with the ruling.
So this case is not new, right? I mean, doping has been going on in Russia for a while now, and it's been at the forefront of doping in sports actually for the last few years. And considering public memory is fairly short, my memory included, I started looking at how far back it began in Russia. Like this trend of using performance enhancing drugs or other kinds of doping. And since I'm not much of a sports enthusiast, I was wildly surprised when I found out that the 70s and 80s saw systematic state-sponsored doping programs, not just in Russia. In fact, the widest of these was actually in East Germany. In the 1976 Olympics, an American swimmer raised a concern over how East German swimmers were using performance-enhancing drugs. But everyone just thought that the American swimmer was just a sore loser. She didn't win the gold that year. It was in the 90s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, that the world discovered what is now dubbed the East German steroid machine. There was an actual program called the State Plan 14.25. And the extent of use of anabolic steroids in swimmers was so high that while in 1972 games, the medal tally stood at 4 silvers and 1 bronze, it became 10 gold, 6 silver, and 1 bronze 4 years later.
Wow.
It's so surprising that no one raised any suspicion around that time. And in fact, this American swimmer also who complained was made out to be a total villain when she spoke of it. And the program was obviously highly classified, but Western investigation in the 90s showed that pretty much all of East Germany's top champions had been doped under the State Plan 14.25. But West Germany wasn't far behind either, by the way, and neither was Soviet Union, nor China. In fact, it said that in 1980 Moscow Games, there was apparently not a single medal winner, at least not a single gold winner, who wasn't on substance.
Seriously?
Yep. And it's so new for me. I'm so surprised. I know so little about sports. But here is something that really made me think. Now that the world knows that there was extensive doping in these games and pretty much all the winners were doped, what do the medals from these games even mean? Right? Should they be given to their rightful winners after all these years, especially of the 70s and 80s? And there's also something else. At that time in the 70s, 80s, and now we know that there used to be this state program that did, this whole doping program.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, the kind of techniques that the state program used, they were not detectable in testing. That's how advanced they were. So at that time, testing used to happen, but it just didn't come through in the tests that they were doped.
Interesting.
Yeah. Then in 2010, of course, came the biggest Russian doping scandal, where a whistleblower revealed that the Russian anti-doping agency was categorically working against the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, in helping athletes cheat. WADA investigated and led to some 145 Russian athletes being on the most suspicious list. IOC stripped off 29 medals from Russia, corresponding to 2008 and 2012 games alone. Just 2 games and 29 medals were stripped off. And thanks to this, in December 2019, WADA announced that Russia was still non-compliant with doping standards and it would be banned from all sporting events for 4 years, which is where we are now. And Russian athletes are to participate in Olympics, but again, under the Russian Olympic Committee. So that's where we're at.
Okay, so I quickly just want to add on to all this that there are a number of loopholes that are exploited in the games. Athletes use this to perform despite their country being banned. And countries use this to bypass entire doping laws. Basically, as an athlete, like Sara said, you cannot sing your national anthem or fly the flag at the games. And this is not a big deal if you're not Indian. Also, Putin wasn't invited, but he clearly has plans for this year. And this year's Olympic contingent for Russia is at the Games under the name of the Russian Olympic Committee, and Kamila Valieva is amongst this contingent, performing as a protected person since she is yet to turn 16, which makes the CAS ruling reek all the more of terrible governance. So trimetazidine is a drug that helps the heart function better, and for elite athletes, this acts as a performance enhancer. Now it has been banned since at least 2014, and Kamila isn't the only one to have taken it. Between 2011 and 15, which is when the doping charges began to be taken seriously, 1,000 athletes from 30 different sports were confirmed to have been provided the drug by the government. And it's a badly kept secret in the sports fraternity that the Russian doping scandal, all of this basically just dates back to the Soviet era. And we think even before that. But the precedent set by the CAS ruling is really terrible. Why? Because athletes have lost their medals and reputation for much less. Back in the 2000 Sydney Games, a gymnast by the name of Andrea Radusin was stripped of her overall gold after testing positive for pseudoephedrine. This is a substance that is found in OTC cold medicine, and Radusin was a minor at the time, like Kamila. But in her case, the CAS insisted that the Olympic regulations needed to be upheld without compromise. This was after the court conceded that the cold medicine did not give her any advantage during her performance. Recently, runner Sha'Carri Richardson qualified for the 2020 Summer Games with the fastest time in the women's 100 meter. However, she was suspended from the games because of THC in her sample. Yes, weed, the famous performance-enhancing drug for elite athletes. But this isn't even about an uneven playing field or biases. It's about sustaining your athletes. Performance sports like figure skating are absolutely dominated by teenagers and athletes in their early 20s. So getting a cocktail of performance enhancers can lead to several complications in their future. Like, it also greatly increases the sustained injuries over the years, especially in sports like gymnastics and figure skating that are already so volatile that athletes get suspended and get massive point deductions if they perform a high-risk routine that is deemed very dangerous. And of course, you wouldn't expect a ruling like this from the highest sport regulatory body in the world that sings praises of Olympic principles and sport credibility and what have you.
So, okay, I'm going to sum this up for everyone. The bottom line, guys, is, and hear me out, doping is not dope.
No, cancel. Cancel.
The only reason why I was so interested in this story, I needed to say this. We ignore Vagda cancelling me, like how the court overturned the ban. On that note, we come to the end of this segment. We will be right back after a short break. You're listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is in conversation with Vedant Lamba, sneakerhead and founder of the Main Street Marketplace. Vedant shares how his vlogging routine led to the creation of his sneaker company. On Shunya One, Sheila Datya and I are joined by Taran Chabra, founder of Neiman's. We talked to him about how he started the shoe company and built a value-driven brand. On Big Talk about Tiny Humans, Devi Shobha and Meghna share a 4-step guideline for talking to children about death. On Say No to Drama, Chetna drops some truth bombs about the happily ever after of life post the wedding. And on Hanswani, hear the story of Us Bheed Mein Wo Kaun Tha. It details the tragic story of the laborers who had to migrate their villages on foot during the pandemic in 2020. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our others for that matter, please do tell a friend. Don't forget to rate us on any other platforms that you're listening to us, whether it's a rating, whether it's a review, it all helps. And do remember to check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. They're available on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda, CoinSwitch, Kuber, and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast. I am finally back here after, I think, a 2-week of some positivity streak. Anyway, sometime last week, the New Zealand police used an unusual technique to disperse anti-vaccine protesters who had assembled outside the parliament. They played songs by Barry Manilow and, wait for it, the incredibly annoying Baby Shark song. Yes. So to add to it, James Blunt's You're Beautiful was also added to the playlist on his personal request. Yeah, he felt some weird FOMO about not being part of the same playlist as Baby Shark. Anyway, this weird Kiwi tactic of dispersing the crowd failed pretty darn spectacularly because the anti-vaxxers started singing along and had this weird protest means block party things going on. And this item's on my roast list because, well, anti-vaxxers and Baby Shark, need I defend myself further?
It's a very unusual tactic, honestly. How did you think that this was ever going to help you?
And they're anti-vaxxers. It's not like their logic isn't working, so they probably tried other things.
Yeah, I was going to say that would have worked on me, but like Sara said, logic is clearly not in play here. And for me, there is yet another thing that makes you wonder, where did you go wrong? And this is a tech thing. There are now AIs that can flirt with you. I'm not really trying to be part of a remake of Blade Runner 2049 or Lucy or Her, where people just fall in love willy-nilly with their computers. So this ad does nothing to dial down the creepiness either. There's a soft AI voice that tells you, I am not real, I was never born, and I will never die, which is hardly what you want to be talking about on a first date, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, considering the things you see on dating apps, I feel like this is not the worst you can see.
Come out with it, Sara. What have you seen on dating apps?
Moving on swiftly. Do you have a fave item this week, Vagda?
Yes. Your resident art critic at Press Decode has some advice. That is, always be prepared for boredom on your first day of work. It's usually light. You're likely to be bored. And especially if you're a security guard at an art gallery. Unless there's a big heist at the gallery, your work will mostly be to sit, to stand, wait, and look around until your shift is over. But this advice is too late for a guard at a Russian gallery at the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Center in Ekaterinburg. It was his first day and he was terribly bored. What stood in front of him was defenseless, 3 figures, a painting by a Russian artist, Anna Leporskaya. I'm not sure if I am pronouncing that name right. That features 3 faceless figures, which might as well be finger figures wearing clothes that don't have any facial features. This was a nice description by a close friend of mine. Anyway, the guard drew eyes on them with a ballpoint pen. So amused, but also horrified. The Vanguard painting of 1930s vintage was insured for $1.4 million. And apparently the man didn't push the pen too hard, so restoration can be done.
How thoughtful of him.
Yes. Now the guard faces fine and up to 3 months in prison, but the curators don't know his motives. They believe it was some kind of lapse in sanity. Yes, boredom at work is very much a lapse in sanity that I can empathize with.
Where do you have the time to be bored?
I'm not talking about now. Previously.
That makes sense. And that was our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all major podcast streaming platforms.
What is the workplace and how does your gender and body affect your right at work? Hey, I'm Priya Mirza, and on the Longest Constitution podcast, we critically examine the vision of the Indian Constitution and laws. In season 1, we looked at sex, gender, sexuality in India, and the landmark judgments which transformed our rights as citizens in this country. In season 2, we discussed the laws which shape the workplace and examine how ability, competence, and merit impact us, and much more. Join me, Priya Mirza, every Wednesday only on the IVM Podcast app, website, and all the major podcast streaming platforms.